Yeah, got confirmation that sounds okay and looks okay from campus. So, could we also get a little bit of a number on how many is on campus right now in our room?
Just
Yeah, we're looking about 20 that's in on campus right now, listening in as well. I don't know if we want to wait a couple more minutes to see if someone else joins or not. That's totally up to you and how you're feeling about that.
yeah, we can wait if it gives the chance for more folk to join. Yeah. Just I think this is the right one. I'll just share screen just to see if that's working. Is that the wrong one? That might be the wrong one. Does that show? Oh,
It's kind of flickering in and out, so I don't know what's going on there.
I think it might be. I don't know if streaming PowerPoint is an actual thing is a good idea. Let me just do this very quickly, and then there we go. 2 seconds. I might have to do this way.
Yeah, no worries.
Windows. Go. Start for this first. I did have a video for the very start of this, but it's if Outlook's not actually working, then thingy. Oh, I see Lewis in here as well. No pressure.
Well, looks like we're starting to get some few people in here. It's fun.
Yeah.
Just a reminder, we're trying to record this right, and we'll put it up on YouTube as well later on.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. I could probably start now, or do you want to give it a couple more minutes just to give more people time to join?
It's totally up to you. This is your time. You're kind of controlling this. I'm just here to help. So if you
Right.
want to just get it going, then let's get going.
Yeah, can do. Okay, cool. So I guess we'll start then. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining like today's talk. My name's Stefano. I'm an associate producer at Cloud Imperium Games. Been with the company roughly 9 months, so I'm very, very, very new. I did actually get hired out of uni with the company, so I am also a very fresh like graduate. Say graduate, dropout slash and finish my degree. But yeah, so today's talk is kind of I'll give a brief overview after we watch this trailer. But yeah, today's talk is going to be about kind of my journey through education to getting the job, and then currently what I do at the moment, what production is, and some little like pointers and stuff as well. So yeah, we'll start off with the trailer. So this is Star Citizen. This is the game that I'm currently working on at the moment. There we go. So yeah, that is our trailer for the game made by the very talented marketing team. So I'll just very quickly reshare screen so I can get the PowerPoint presentation up. There we go. Cool. So I think that should be it there. Just make sure everybody rejoins. There we go. Cool.
As a heads up, it's black. I don't know if that's.
That should be correct. Sorry, yeah. There we go. Yeah, so this presentation or like talk today is going to be mainly about kind of like a fresh game dev experience. So like I was saying, I came out of uni not too long ago and started fresh in the industry. So this is kind of like probably a good idea of like what to expect, like the kind of transition from like university into actual like game dev and then actual the industry as well. So um so as a wee kind of breakdown of what this presentation is going to be, again, like I said before, we'll go through my kind of education background a little bit. We'll be going through production and what it is. We'll also be looking at essentially how you like for applying for jobs and looking at mainly production style jobs, but this does apply to like other things as well, other disciplines. So if you're like a 3D artist or anything like that, there'll be some bits in there for you as well. And then we'll also be looking at some like good to know, so some handy like pointers. I think the education part, a lot of you will probably, relate to hopefully. So we'll see how that goes. So about me, so I'm part Italian, part Scottish. As you could probably tell, the accent does not match the name. So yeah, I come from a small town in Leven back home, and then from there, I've worked at Game. So essentially, what happened was I managed to get a job at Game during high school, which I've managed to kind of keep going all the way through my education through college and uni. During that time as well, I was an ex-swimming instructor and an ex-jiu-jitsu sensei as well, so I've done quite a bit in terms of like teaching, management, coaching, that sort of thing. I've got some hobbies as well, so longboarding, I do quite a lot bit of that. Obviously, I like video games. If I wasn't in this industry, then wouldn't really make much sense. And I read a bit of manga and watch quite a lot of anime, so that's do my pastime. And I have 6 dogs as well, so quite a monstrous pack to kind of look after. So at home is always very very busy. So looking at the education, so I was saying I studied at Fife College when I left uni. I did digital design and development. So for Scotland, I don't know if it's the same for down here in England, but we have the choice to go to college. You don't necessarily need to. Unfortunately, my grades in high school were not fantastic, so I had to get a kind of like a higher national diploma, which takes 2 years to get, which then let me get into my second year of university. During that time at college, I was still a sales assistant at Games, so working alongside that, getting retail experience as well as obviously the experience from college and education. Then went on to Abertay, one of the top universities in Scotland for computing. They like to brag about that. And I studied games design and production. Unfortunately, there wasn't much production study during that time. It was more games design and touching a bit of base of everything. And then on the back of that, halfway through my 4th year, I applied to Cloud Imperium Games, and they hired me as an assistant producer to kind of help out with their art location team. And during that time, I was an assistant manager, which helped me land the job as well. So, so my uni experience overall. So as uni is at the moment, you'll tend to find whenever you go to apply or you speak to your lecturers or whatnot, they'll give you like an ideal situation of you do in Scotland it's 4 years, but for some of you it's 3. But you're like, your first year, you're kind of getting settled, meeting people, finding your feet in terms of like what you want to do, exploring all the different options. Second year is a little bit more of that, but kind of getting stuff like kind of concrete. Your third year was obviously that's where you really kind of start to hone your skills and decide, where you kind of want to be going. And then your 4th year is all about obviously building your presentation and then going on to actually write your dissertation if you've got one. If you're lucky enough to not have one, that's an added bonus. Dissertations are, not for the faint of heart. However, though, in reality, for me, it was very different. I came out of college, like I was saying, and I ended up in second year of uni. Unfortunately, college didn't really teach us much as to what the actual uni course was on, so second year was a lot of catch up. And then for a lot of us, when I was in my third year, COVID struck. So I think everybody here could probably relate with obviously COVID, and it disrupted a lot of things. It disrupted study, just general life. That was actually quite a struggle. You're learning from home all the time. You're not getting to meet people. It's all digital. I know a lot of these courses are very digital wise, but having that extra like contact with people is really, really beneficial. So missing that was like, a little bit rough. And then so fourth year, like you're saying, I did half of it up until the point where I had to do the dissertation, and then I left to go work at CIG. So uni lecturers might not like that, might not agree with that image. So yeah, don't take it literally. But what I would say is just from my experience, if you are sitting there thinking, oh, this uni, this uni experience that I'm having, is it right? Is it what is meant to happen? There's no right way to have a uni experience. The uni experience you have is your experience, and no matter what the kind of like boundaries, any kind of like red tape you might come across, or even struggles, you can get there with it as well, no matter the disruptions. So hang tight in there because it can be rough. I know. So for what did I focus on then? So from my experience, I've touched on quite a lot of different subjects. I was very much a kind of like generalist student when I was in uni. I didn't really kind of focus on one thing in particular. So in my first year, I studied. In my second year, I studied more level design, blueprinting, and Unreal Engine 4. So this thing in front of you here is one of the prison escape game that I'd made. It's kind of like my main kind of project for that, which really let you kind of explore, kind of get into grips with actual like games design, level design, mission design, that sort of thing. So that was one of the main key things that I'd focused on. It was a really interesting kind of project, but you can see that it's very, very rough. I never got to finish it. There's not been a lighting pass on that, so everything's really, really dark, which is probably not the best. So going on from that in second year, for Abertay, we get taught to do we get given clients, real world clients that come in and ask us to do different projects for them. So my group was lucky enough to get hired by Edinburgh Airport to do a security training sim for their staff. So the main idea that we had for it was essentially you would have different assets that you could basically pull into the game. You would then look at that and go, okay, this is what this asset is, this is what normal looks like. You would then hit the X-ray button and it would put it under the style of what it would be like under one of these like baggage like scanners essentially. And the whole idea was to basically be able to identify what those types of asset was. So as you can see in the Teddy, it's got a lump of Semtex in its head. And then it's also got a mobile phone on the inside of it as well. The reason I've given a close-up of the mobile phone is when I was on this project, I was the producer for it, and I also did some 3D art. The one production mistake that I did make was I put one artist on this for the entirety of the project. They did also agree to do this. It wasn't more like you do it. It was more of a general agreement. This is a really, really bad idea. Do not, whatever you do, if you're ever doing group projects, have one person on an asset for an entire project. Burnout will happen. That person did get burnt out. And they were just, they were happy with the end result, but it was not needed at all, really. It should have been a lot more simplistic. So if there's anything to take away from that, it's, don't do assets in that amount of detail if you can avoid it. Obviously, if you're a 3D artist, that might be something that you are looking for. It might be one asset that you're working on for the entirety of your project, and that's fine. But if you're making like multiple assets, you want to try and be able to do, multiple assets. So don't make them in such a great detail if you don't need to. And for any aspiring producers out there, learn from my mistake. In fourth year, I kind of went on to do a little bit more kind of exploration again. So we've had, level design, mission design, and blueprinting. We then went on to production and 3D art, and now we're looking at I think it was C# programming for this, or C++. I can't quite remember. But yeah, this one was more of an exploration into VR and how VR works. This would have been my main dissertation project as well if I decided to, stay on and finish fourth year. The main idea with this was to try and kind of make an Alice in Wonderland style study on perception. So the whole idea would be is that you start off in the room as a normal human being. You can walk around with it, interact with the different assets. You then click a button and it shrinks you to the size of a mouse. That way you can then walk around it and see it from the perspective of that person or of that animal. And then you hit another button, and then in the GIF there you can see it takes you out of the room, and you can actually look into it. And it was a study on how people would interact with that sort of asset. Fortunately, as I was saying before, because of COVID, it was a bit rough, and I also caught COVID, so I couldn't finish this project. So yeah, there is a common theme without all of these is that I never finish a project. Or I never get anything finalized. Again, don't do what I do. Try and finish off your projects if you can. They are important that you do get a finalized asset or a finalized idea. Even if it's a prototype, take it to the point where you're, do you know what, happy enough that it would make it to the next stage. Because employers will be looking for, things in your actual portfolio that you can sit there and go, I took this to the end of white box or the end of grey box or the end of final art, and they can see your actual process all the way through. Similar again for any like programmers as well. There was a lot of times where like indentation and code, commenting, stuff like that was required for us as well, as it is in industry as well. So just make sure obviously you're keeping that tidy and that you actually have it organized. Spend the time to actually tidy up your code if you can, because it'll do absolute wonders if you do need to show it off to somebody because they will really appreciate it. So what did I learn throughout the rest of this then? Out of all of these different years of uni, make sure to take advantage of your uni resources. So, the uni will say obviously you've got so many resources available to you. Do take advantage of them because softwares in general are very, very expensive. Books are very, very expensive too, or can be. So the best time to kind of do it is obviously when you're at uni, try a bit of everything if you can. That's obviously relative to your actual, special what you want to be working as in industry. Try and obviously aim towards that, but make sure to at least touch on every bit of software if you can. That way, at least you kind of roughly know because there's so many different companies that use so many different resources. Like CIG, they let us use multiple different types like Maya Max, Blender, ZBrush, that sort of thing. So being able to actually roughly know those sorts of programs and get a rough understanding of them gives you a massive advantage over anybody else that maybe only knows one or two of those softwares. So, oh, that's a notification. So the other thing as well that I learned is obviously don't overwork yourself. Make sure that you do have a decent sleep schedule. Try and start a hobby. That's why I took up longboarding originally was at university. I've been doing skateboarding before, but it was just to kind of try and take a break and get out of the house where I can. The whole when you were able to go out and exercise while doing like COVID was going on, I was longboarding, doing that sort of thing. And make sure to get away from the screen. So for that, try and treat your uni day as like, an actual work day. If it's whether it's a 9 to 5 or like an 8 till 4, anything like that, try and make sure that you take regular breaks throughout that day like you normally would at work. Because none of the artists or none of the programmers or anything like that are working continuously throughout the day. They're always doing something else. They're looking away from the computer, sorting stuff. So try and treat it like that to get yourself into the rhythm of this is what it would be like working in industry. And in that way, it means that it frees up your evenings. So if you're sitting there going like, do you know what, I want to work a little bit more, absolutely you can do. But it means that you're not sitting burnt out continuously all the time because you're working till like 9 till 12, and you're continually working all the way through that. Try and give yourself a kind of I don't know, a structured day so that at least you can sit there and go, do you know what, I've made good progress, and doing it that way. Other things that I'd learned, so it wasn't just uni that obviously I was learning from. My job at Game actually gave me quite a lot of experience in terms of more so the production side of things because they are transferable skills, which are a massive bonus. So again, things like risk management, being able to delegate tasks, any problem solving. If you've got a customer, if anybody that works in retail at the moment will feel the pain or have worked in retail will feel the pain. If you've got a dodgy customer or somebody who's a little bit pissed off, how do you deal with that person? How do you de-escalate the situation? How do you make sure that it's good for the benefit of the company and the person, which kind of really takes care into it. And then it's also looking after your team as well. So being able to actually sit there and go, do you know what? Are my team okay? Is everybody happy in their job role? What is their needs and wants, and that sort of thing. So having that kind of job was really, really beneficial. Again, that isn't meant to say that if you don't have a job at uni you're not going to get good experience. Having a job while at uni is obviously a massive burden. A lot of the time when it comes to sorry a lot of the time when it comes to essentially doing the job and also university study, you're going to be constantly working all the time. I never really took a break during that time when I was at uni, between work and study, and I did get burnt out quite a lot. So again, learning from mistakes, trying, if you do have a job, don't make it that it's your sole, focus. Make sure that your university work is your sole focus. If you don't have a job at uni, make sure that you are putting enough, time and effort into your study to make up for not having the extra experience. Because there will come to a point where, companies will be looking for, any kind of extra experience outside of uni. Volunteering is a good way of doing it as well. So, for example, if you end up going into uni and you want to help out with game jams, or you want to help out with younger students, that sort of thing, that's also really, really good experience for coming into industry as well, because it shows that you're taking the extra mile to just do some things. So there's plenty of ways to actually, go about getting this extra experience without actually having to have a job. So it's always worth reaching out to, lecturers, things like that, see if they do need that help, and then, take it from there. The other thing that I did learn as well, which unfortunately was a little bit later on in the year, years of uni, but it was make sure that, any kind of portfolio pieces you've got, any CVs, any websites are always up to date. I never kept mine up to date for a massive amount of time, and then it ended up coming to the point where I started actually applying for jobs, and I didn't have a good enough CV or didn't portfolio, especially from a kind of production background, because everything was very unfinished. I had to find the best way to kind of make that presentable. So you really want to make sure that not only does your portfolio look presentable and eye-catching, but it has some personality about it, because nobody's going to want to sit there and look at a black and white screen and be like, yeah, this person's really, put a lot of effort into their, portfolio and CV, and it's not a bore to read. A lot of the time people will just look for that little bit extra effort. So make sure it's got a little bit of flair, and then that'll make it, stand out above the rest. Because, employers do take the time to look through your CV. As much as some people say they don't have the time to, people will put aside time to look through CVs and such. And, if they can see that you've got that flair in your CV, they'll go, oh, this is interesting, and they'll actually want to read through it. So that's enough about the education side, because I'm pretty sure everybody's obviously been through that. Now we'll actually move into the actual production side of things. So what is actual production? So production, is it a real game development job? I've heard a lot of the time since I've actually, started the job, that they were like, oh yeah, maybe it's not a real development job. People on Twitter bashing it, that sort of thing. Production is an actual game development job. You are a game developer if you are a producer. A lot of the time with production, there is a very clear difference between game production and production. Production itself is more about looking after your team, facilitating them, scheduling them, that sort of thing. Actually being able to, ensure that things are going to come out on time, call out risks where they're needed. If things aren't going to be released on time, figure out ways about, sorting that, stopping things from happening early if they're going to be a detriment. Whereas actual game production is more about the actual process of how a game's made. So going from pre-production to white box, grey box, final art, QA, testing, release, and then pre-release support as well, and then DLC if you're going to do that. So there is a little bit of a difference. So if you do hear somebody go, oh, production, that is more about, management, team management, that sort of thing. And if it's game production, that's more about, the actual making of the game itself. So going on from that, production is kind of built up of many different things, but the biggest thing that you can learn is production methodologies. So looking at, agile, waterfall, spiral, RAD and RAB, which is rapid application development, and rapid application building, and RUP, which is rational unified process. So what are these? We at CIG use Agile. So Agile is very much a case where you can dedicate yourself to a specific task on a specific sprint. So usually our sprints are 2 weeks apiece. Between that time, you usually set yourself a bunch of tasks to go, right, I want to get to this point A by the time that I've finished my 2 weeks. But things might happen as game development do, where you can't actually be able to get to that goal because you've got other priorities that come in. So Agile allows for that to kind of, happen, be able to pick up another task that's maybe not related to your goal, work on it, and then you just continually rinse and repeat over the sprints. Waterfall is more of a kind of structured development. So waterfall is very much a case of if you're starting a project, you basically have to complete one task before you can move on to the next, and it has to pass a validation. If it doesn't pass the validation, you keep working on that task until you move to the next one, and you can never go back up. So if you imagine that it's kind of like a sliding slope, you can never go back up the way to go and fix something from before. If something's broken from previous, you need to keep on working all the way through the rest of your tasks and then come back to the start again to sort it and go all the way through again. So that's kind of what waterfall is. You don't see it quite a lot in the games industry, from what I've seen anyway so far. There's a lot of companies that do prefer agile, just because it does allow you to be more flexible. You've got Spiral as well. So Spiral is the same kind of thing again. It's similar to Waterfall, but a little bit different. Spiral does allow you to do kind of, a mix of agile to a certain degree and being able to kind of swap between different tasks, as long as you're following a path of, I need to do this task to get this task done, to get this task done, and then following it down. But it does allow you to jump between those different tasks as well. Rapid application development. So rapid application development and building are basically essentially ones where you are creating multiple prototypes. What you're doing is you're essentially trying to give the proof of concept that it works by building multiple different variations of the kind of like, program that you're trying to make, or the actual app that you're building. And then from there, it's a case of, right, can we use this one? Can we not? What was working in, say, for example, project A versus project B? And then what you do is you then come to a retrospective, you look at that and you go, right, what can we take from each, put it together, does that work? And then go again, and then you create multiple prototypes again. And it's a simple rinse and repeat. And rational unified process, that essentially, when you're looking at it in terms of the actual production, of that, trying to think of the best way to describe this here. You're essentially trying to make sure that like all your teams are together in one goal when you're pushing forward for something, so that everybody's unified. You're trying to make sure that everybody's going to end up be finishing at the correct point of time, so you're never having to wait on somebody coming in. Agile has this issue at the moment, where if you're working on something because you're hopping on different tasks, your main issue is going to be is that, say for example, if you have team A and team B, and team A are working and they don't have any issues, and then team B are working on something but they're having a ton of issues, team A is going to get finished before team B does, so what does team A do? And that's kind of where this kind of mismatch kind of happens, which you don't want. You want everybody finishing at the same time. So so that's with that. So that's also an important thing to kind of take note as well, is that with agile there are some things that are not as good. Each one does have obviously the benefits and also the disadvantages as well, so it's obviously worth making sure that you understand that. And then obviously, this is where for like a production kind of thing, things like risk management, scheduling, organization skills come in, and this is where you kind of sit there and go, right, how best do we avoid this, or how do we mitigate it? And if you do have to take it on, how best you work around that sort of thing. Oh, my hierarchy's not working. So we're looking at production then, in terms of my role at CIG and what I do. So as I said before, I work in Agile a lot of the time. I look after most of the location art that happens for the company on the Star Citizen side. So we've got Star Citizen that we're working on, and we're also working on Squadron 42. But I don't work in Squadron 42. So the teams that I used to look after props. Unfortunately, they are no longer a team. But yeah, I used to look after those guys. I look after lighting currently, so the lighting that's going on in the game, and I also look after all the locations that are going in the game. So currently at the moment, I look after quite a lot of multidiscipline teams. I look after mission designers, level designers, 3D artists, or 3D environment artists and 3D prop artists, slash environment artists. So there's quite a lot of different people that I look after at the moment. So when you're actually doing that, one of the main things in production that they look for is being able to, and again, this is where, from my experience at uni, has kind of helped. Touching on everything has allowed me to understand pipelines and workflows between all these different teams. I know roughly how a prop is made. I know roughly how the environments are made from start to finish. I know what the processes are. I know what the designers are working on and how they work and where they need to come in, and the mission designers where they come in. And it's all structured. So having an understanding of, not only, like I was saying before, how programs are made, not programs are made, but the different programs of making things. So again, like with the artists, your ZBrush and Maya, Max, that sort of thing. but being able to understand pipelines and workflows and looking into other game development, careers, not just the one that you're going into, it'll give you another massive advantage if you're ever looking to get employed in the industry, because people will sit there and go, okay, not only do you know your own stuff, but you are aware of the wider knowledge of, the games industry and know roughly where you sit in amongst everybody else. It's not absolutely necessary, but it is something that's like a nice to know. Especially when you do come in and you wonder, oh, why is my asset not going to be used here? That's because all these other teams are doing things to try and get it to, final. So what is the producer's purpose? So like I was saying before, a lot of it is very similar to management, but it isn't quite management. The producer will never really manage a team, again, depending on the company. But a producer should never really be managing the team. The lead should be managing the team. So that person will be someone who's specialized in, whatever it is. So for example, I'll take props because I worked very, very closely with them for a long while. You would have a lead props artist. You would then have, props artists underneath that person. That lead props artist would be the manager of the team. And then what would happen is then I would then come in and work with the lead to make sure that, they're okay, they're working fine, they're up to date and scheduled, but then also the rest of the team are scheduled as well. And then also looking after their team health. So you're almost like a manager, but not quite. You don't have the same responsibility as what the lead does. The lead's there for the team. You're there for the lead and the team, so you can't manage both, essentially. And normally that lead will have a director that's above them, and that's their manager. So production kind of floats in this weird space in between, which is probably why a lot of people tend to end up being like, so what do producers actually do? Because I get that question all the time, and nobody, I have to kind of sit there and go, well, we do a little bit of everything, a tiny bit. But yeah, so like I was saying, we look after the team health and morale. We obviously make sure that work's being completed on time, scheduling, all that sort of stuff. If you're not doing that, that's like producer 101. If you're not scheduling your team, you're doing something wrong. You're also, while obviously mitigating risk, I've got that there, you're not necessarily mitigating the risk itself. What you're doing is you're bringing the risk to light and you're making people aware of it so that they can then go ahead and do the work to, avoid that risk happening or working through it. You're very much there to kind of be like an eyes and ears for the team, especially when you're communicating with other teams around. You're never just working with your team, you're working with everybody else as well around you. So you have to be very much aware of, team A's working on this, team B's working on this. So what's going to happen to my team if these two teams finish early or whatnot? Again, while you're still not managing the team, you're still obviously expected to make sure that it's a positive working environment for the team as well. So obviously encouraging people, motivating them. CIG is in a very good position where I get to actually, give feedback a little bit at times. I give my own opinion on like what I think would happen. Again, I get told to stay in my lane a little bit. That's a running joke. But the actual thing of it is that a lot of the time I could go, oh, maybe what about this? And the artist will go, oh, maybe that's a good idea. Or maybe it's not. They might just tell me to be like, no, quiet and sit down. And then from there I go, yeah, do you know what? That's not my job, so I can't say. But there is a little bit of camaraderie there, and being able to kind of, give your opinion. So you're never out, you're just kind of sitting there as like a one solid unit that everybody looks at and goes, oh, producers are scary. You're very much integrated in the team. And then obviously the final is bugging people to update their Jiras. That's if you're on game dev Twitter, you'll see a lot of producers making jokes about Jira and whatnot, it being the greatest software in the world, not the greatest software in the world, and artists and programmers alike will always complain about Jira. So it is a good software. I will put my foot down. It is a good software, but people don't like logging their time. So again, key skills with this. There obviously are quite a lot of ones there, but the main one that you do want to be is, from my experience and from my opinion, is you want to be a good facilitator. You can be absolutely everything else there. You can be a good problem solver. You can, be an organizer. You can communicate with people. But if you can't facilitate your team, like look after them, if you can't give them, the workspace that they need to be able to work effectively, be able to actually support them, defend them as well. I say defend. A lot of the time what happens is that, for example, you have other teams that have priorities. They need to get their stuff done. If they're sitting there going, oh, your team's not doing this, your team's not doing that, you have to be there as a pushback to be like, well, actually, this is the reason why. So it's not on them. It's just as it is, how it goes. So you have to be able to sit there and look after your team properly, and also make sure that they're not just being like accused of whatnot, or just being like they're not doing work quick enough. It's not a case of that. You have to be able to be there to show the data, to show actually no, they are doing work. It's just this asset is taking a long time. Again, I'm using a lot of art references here because I'm an art producer, but again, it'll be the same with code. We get a lot of time where coders, like programmers, their job is absolutely rough. I do not envy them one bit. I do not envy the program producers either. So a lot of the time they have to keep on basically explaining why things aren't done on time and why they miss deadlines, or if they do hit a deadline, be like, why did it hit early this time? So yeah. So the day to day. So this is kind of running through what I usually experience on a day-to-day basis as a producer. So I am meant to start at 9 a.m., 8 a.m. I actually usually start at 9 because I'm lazy and I like to sleep in. Again, nobody tell the company. So a lot of the time what I do is when I come in, I make notes of what's needing done of a day. Usually that is through by checking emails, if there's any issues that I need to chase up, any of that sort of thing. I usually spend most of my morning doing that. Then you're in meetings. I will say for any aspiring producers, you will be very meeting heavy. It is a lot of the job is sitting in meetings and helping make decisions, guiding or coordinating directors to do certain work when, and also making decisions. A lot of my job at the moment is also doing that. You then got your general kind of team structure stuff. So again, looking at it from a Cloud Imperium point of view, we have like stand-ups for the teams, so they know what they're doing of a day. We've got reviews to view their artwork, and also sprint reviews to see how everybody did over 2 weeks. You've got kickoffs, so if there's like certain goals or certain like things they want to put into the game, we usually have a big meeting to talk about that. And see exactly like what teams are going to be needed and what the actual idea of it is. So a lot of the time that'll be like features and things for the game. And then team catch-ups as well. So it's always really important to have a team sync. While you have your stand-ups, which are more of like this is what I'm doing today, you do also need to put time aside to allow the team to chat, integrate with each other, and then also let yourself integrate with the team as well and speak to them and make friends. The whole point, like again, obviously you're building a game and it is a professional job, but you can make friends through that as well. And being able to actually have these team catch-ups really allows that to happen because you're actually communicating more. Then you have your lunch. I usually take a half-hour lunch instead of an hour because it's usually quite busy. Then you're into more meetings and more catch-up on work. You're usually chasing things if people are actually, needing stuff from you. And then your day's done. And then you go home. And then I usually come home, eat dinner, and fall asleep because I'm, dead. And then we go on the next day again. So, like what I was saying before, obviously this is like a day-to-day. Is very, very generic. It doesn't go into any too much specifics of like what actually goes on. Days are obviously busier than others. If you're a 3D artist, or actually I keep using 3D artist as a term, if you're anybody else apart from a producer, a lead, or a director, I wouldn't expect anybody to be in a meeting heavy day. A lot of your time is spent, actually developing the game. And if it's a good company, you should pretty much be sitting there going, I don't have any meetings today, or I maybe have a 15-minute meeting to be in, and that's it. A lot of your time is self-managed, or it should be self-managed. There's nobody really telling you what you do or what you have to do apart from your lead. But your lead is also really busy as well. So it's very much a case of you have to kind of sit there and go, right, what am I going to do? So with it being at uni at the moment as well, it is very good practice to actually sit down and go, like I was saying before, take it like a normal like professional day and go, what do I want to get done today? What do I need to do? And what can I actually get done within that time? Give yourself 10-15 minutes to start the day, plan it out, and then start working. If you ever are in a situation where you do have a lot of meetings during the day, especially in your professional career when you're not supposed to be in that sort of thing, that is something that I would raise as like a concern, because you should be building stuff or making things. You shouldn't be sitting in a meeting listening to other people chat. That's a producer's job. So coming on from that, to give you guys a little bit more specifics on like kind of day-to-day softwares that I use to kind of help me as a producer. So we've got these two very, very good softwares. The first one is obviously Trello. So you can see there, obviously, I've given what Trello would describe as what they are. The way that I use Trello personally is to track personal goals. I never use Trello to really track team progress. That is all done through Jira. Your Trello should be, and again, for anybody else that isn't a producer, Trello is a very, very good program to be able to track your goals, set dates for things. If you want to try and complete something by a certain date, whether that be, practicing a software or, reading a book or something like that, even at uni, using Trello to kind of give yourself a day-to-day structure of these are the goals that I want to hit by a certain date. It's a fantastic software. I used it at uni as well, and it really, really was beneficial, giving me some sort of structure and being able to keep track of everything. So highly recommend it. You then obviously got Jira. Depending on obviously the company that you work for, it may also be called Slack, which is something slightly different, but it still, makes it's still kind of the same. Your main thing for that will be is it's your producer will most likely be the person that runs this, sets it up, that sort of thing. You are essentially doing what this person's doing the GIF here and moving your tasks from ready to in progress and done. Logging your time on those tasks, which is very important because it allows producers to see how long you're taking on something. And then also, just obviously for anybody who's for everybody here that will end up in industry or looking for a job in industry, on your Jiras, you please log your time because it will allow, say for example, me, if I'm ever looking at your work to go, okay, well, it took you 5 days to do this asset. So that means if you need to make another asset like this, it actually will take you 5 days to do it. So I'm not going to give you an asset that's going to take you 10 days to do, for example, and I'll go, oh, well, you did this in like 3 the other time because you just only logged 3 days of work. So there you go, you've got 3 days to do this asset, or you've got 3 days to write this bit of code. That's normally how it works. Is a lot of the time when it comes to, along with your lead producers will look at time logged and go, right, it's going to take you X amount of time to do this asset, that's fine, and give you it. And then when it comes to the time when you go, oh, I actually haven't finished this, and you go, well, why haven't you? So logging your time is very, very important, especially because it is a detriment to yourself if you don't do it. We then also use Confluence. So again, there's Confluences, this is what we are. They also added an exclamation mark in that, so it is very cool. But Confluence is a glorified Word document, essentially. So Atlassian is like an overall parent company. They own, Confluence, Jira, and a couple of other things like Okta, things like that. But Confluence, a lot of the time, you will probably find that your company that you work for will use this software. And it is just literally a Word document. It's like a cloud-based system so that people can sit there, look at things and go, right, this is how you maybe make an asset. This is how your workflow is. So it's not very special. But it is very, very handy, especially for producers. When I'm looking at things and need to understand workflows, Confluence is there for me as well. So the classic Excel. I had a university lecture when I was, well, obviously I had a university lecture when I was at uni. But one of my university lecturers told me that the industry doesn't use Excel anymore, which is complete bullshit. Excel is one of the most powerful office tools like on the planet. I would highly, highly recommend anybody in production gets to grips with Excel as soon as you can because it will save you massively. I use Excel from scheduling to number crunching to figuring out how the team's doing in terms of it, input numbers. Again, kind of similar to number crunching. But Excel is like your absolute bread and butter. So for anybody that is looking to go into that kind of job role, definitely learn that at least to a good degree. Formulas and stuff will save your life. And then we also use Airtable as well. So the Americans at our company love Airtable. I don't use it very often personally, but I have found it to be very, very beneficial. It is a very, very good tool for using, again, pulling information from Jira and putting it into itself and organizing it. Again, from a production standpoint, this is more so for that. But again, have a look at it. It is really, really worth looking at. But the actual base version of Airtable versus what you actually get in the company will be different because it's set up slightly different. It'll be on a different package. So you might not get the full scope of it. So if you can find any videos of actual real world industry experience of using it, I would have a look at that. And other softwares do exist. So on the production side, obviously I went through, you've got Excel, you've got Slack, Jira, Miro I've got in there, and that is pretty much any kind of profession, doesn't matter what you are. Miro is a fantastic tool for being able to insert images, build schedules. I wouldn't maybe recommend for building schedules a lot of the time, but for something very rough, I use it a lot of the time because it's very, very visually engaging and it actually makes sense to look at. Again, Trello, Confluence, and Airtable in production. On the art side, you've got quite a lot of different things. So this is a mix of 2D and 3D. So for obviously the 2D, Clip Studio Paint, I've put Paint.net in there because Adobe's right after that. Adobe softwares are super expensive, especially after you leave uni. You can actually use Paint.net with plugins to almost simulate Photoshop. That's what I did at uni. It is a pain in the ass to do, but you know it is possible. You then obviously got Adobe. You've got Procreate. For anybody that's got an iPad, Procreate is a fantastic digital drawing software. I highly recommend obviously using it if you can, especially if you're into the 2D art kind of side. Even just for taking notes and things as well, it's very powerful. Again, Miro, a lot of the time for Miro, it'll be a case of for the artists, you'll be using it for more mood boards, references, that sort of thing, building out, ideas, sketches, being able to actually, organize everything into what you need it to do in order to actually understand what you're wanting to draw. I think that was the right way of saying that. For the 3D artists, Maya, 3ds Max are two absolute staple classics. Substance Painter is a very good one to check out as well. Blender and ZBrush as well. All of these softwares, depending on obviously the uni, I don't know if you guys will have them here at this uni specifically, but definitely try and touch on all of these at least once if you can, once or twice. They will be an absolute beneficial, for anybody that's going into industry to look at. For the programmers, you've got your different engines. So obviously Classic, Unity, Unreal. Star Citizen is actually built on CryEngine, so we use that, or a variant of it anyway, I should say. So CryEngine is obviously worth a shout looking at. Godot Game Maker and O3DE is Amazon, used to be Amazon Lumberyard, but it's now the Open3D engine. So if you were looking for something that's a little bit more open source and free to use, O3DE is worth checking out. And a special mention for any narrative designers that are in the talk just now. Twine is a very, very powerful program for narrative designers. Anybody that's looking to make a narrative game, I would highly recommend checking it out. I had a guy on my team who went on from doing 3D art into they went into narrative from 3D art, and he was using Twine, and for him it was like his bread and butter. It's helped him so much with this project, so I definitely recommend checking that out. So now we get on to the really cool bit and really engaging bit of how do you get a job in the industry. So again, how do you land a job in production? But this will be the same for any other job that's in the industry. There's not really a there's not really a way of getting into the industry specifically. A lot of the time when you're looking at different things like this, like job applications. Now, to give some context, all of these images that are about to appear are from a production assistant role. So that's what I started off as, and that's a junior role. And as you can see, they ask for some ridiculous demands. Any 3D artist that you're looking at a junior role, any programmer, you're going to be looking at the same. It's, I want 3 years of experience, and you have to have shipped like 40 games and all of this sort of rubbish essentially. So the kind of keynotes to kind of take away from this is experience, right? So a lot of the time when you're looking at, these types of like requirements, like you're saying, they're going to ask for a ridiculous amount of requirements to actually get the job. In reality, when they say 3 years of production management or like 3 years of 3D art, what they mean is it's any sort of experience at all. Doesn't mean if it's in the video games industry or not in the games industry. Your university experience does count towards that. So never take it as like this is like 3 years on top of my uni study. I'll get onto a little bit more about just applying anyway, but we'll get to that. For production specifically, if you're ever looking for these sorts of jobs in the industry, having pretty good social skills is an absolute benefit. Being able to actually come across and articulate yourself in an actual interview, very, very important. A lot of the time for production, what they look for is the ability for you to be able to be very open and be able to speak to people in a calm manner, be able to kind of take in questions, understand them. That shows that you're like process of thinking and being able to give a rational answer back. Again, kind of jumping back to the experience, things like if you work in retail, for example, will give you a little bit of a benefit in production. We'll give you a little bit of benefit in production because what that will do is that will show that you understand conflict resolution, for example, which ties in with your good social skills. and things like that as well. Being able to actually understand, if I say something like this, is it going to aggravate somebody or is it not? For production, again, enjoyment of scheduling, any sort of, if you enjoy being organized, that sort of thing, being able to understand how best to prioritize work. For uni, this is obviously really important, but it is very important for outside of industry like work as well. If you're looking at, say, for example, making multiple assets, you have to be able to sit there and go, right, what is the most important asset here that needs made in a tier list, and then go, right, how long is each one going to make? And then based on that, go, right, what one should come first? That's a very simple example because that's one of the ones I have to do daily. But the enjoyment of scheduling actually is, shows you how to do that. And it gives you that extra advantage of being able to go, actually, do you know what? I know how to do this. And it's not so much of a burden. I want for others to succeed. Again, obviously talking about, facilitating your team, making sure that they can do their work in a, benefit that, excuse me, sorry. Looking after your team and making sure that they can actually, do the work on time. You never want to be scheduling your team to fail. You maybe want to prep to fail in terms of the fact that if this asset doesn't get done, or how long is this asset going to take in general, right? Maybe add 2 extra days. That way, if something happens, you've got those extra 2 days to work with instead of limiting yourself. So you should always overestimate. And by overestimating, that's allowing your team to succeed because that gives them the time to do it. If they don't do it within that time, that's an extra bonus. But you should never be, scheduling your people or like people on your team into a kind of corner to be like, right, you need to get this done in 2 days, and if you don't get it done, that's it. It should always kind of give a little bit of leeway. Games that, like, say for example, with like God of War Ragnarok that just came out, or any other big AAA games that have an actual deadline on it, it's a little bit more difficult, and that'll kind of have to kind of take on a day-to-day basis and like a kind of scenario case. Whereas for like CIG, because we're like an MMO, we have the ability to continue release patches, and while there are deadlines for those patches can be pushed back if they need to. It's not good that we do it, but it's a case of if they have to happen, that it's beneficial to give your guys a little bit extra time just in case. You can also be dependable. That's another kind of key thing that they look for in production. A lot of the time, my teams, when they come to me, they're usually asking for information about where the teams are at. They're also looking for information on where they can find things, who to reach out to if they're stuck on something, that sort of thing. So you are kind of like this information sponge that people have to come to and continually ask, and you're getting pulled left, right, and center all the time. So you're kind of expected to be able to not only manage your time well and make sure that you know everything, but you have to be to the point where anybody could probably come to you and say, I'm stuck on this, do you know who I can speak to, this sort of thing, and give that information over where you can. It's really, really important, because if you can't, then your team is going to end up struggling because they have to go to the lead, and the lead is going to be too busy sometimes to answer. They might not get that answer straight away, whereas if they come to you, because obviously I spend a lot of times in meetings, I can listen, but I can also do other work at the same time, and that's where that kind of mix comes in. So being dependable is very important. Again, ensuring you're always organised, that mixes in with obviously being very good at scheduling or enjoying it, or at least act like you are. I try to obviously be organised, but a lot of the time that isn't the case just because of game development as it is. So the more obviously you come across that you are like organised, the better. But it should always be a case that you should never try and appear like you're organised when you're not, to your detriment. Everybody's there to make sure that you can do your job well, that you're succeeding as well as your team's succeeding. Nobody wants to see you fail, right? So obviously, like I was saying, at least act like you're organised, but if you're not, that's absolutely fine. It's just if you are struggling, and again, same goes for any other kind of like profession that you go into, or any kind of like career path within games. No matter what, always reach out to your lead and your producer, because they will be, they will help you 110%, because they want to make sure you can do the work. Nobody wants to see you fail. The whole reason you're hired is to do the job, and nobody wants to be like, well, I hired you and you can't do it. They will give you the chances to be able to rectify mistakes and things like that. And as a little Scottish flair for the end of this one, dinna be a fanny, or in English terms, don't be an idiot. A lot of the time you tend to find is that, this industry, while it is, quite big and it generates a lot of money, the actual industry itself is fairly small in terms of people being able to like talk with each other, and it's very, very connected. If you have one bad experience at a company, whether either you're the victim or you've done something to somebody or you've done something or anything like that, it doesn't matter what it is. People will find out because people talk, and it spreads like wildfire. Usually, from my experience anyway, it's like usually within at least 1 or 2 days of something happening, most people know about it already, whether that's through like Twitter, private DMs, or anything like that, whether that's through work. Just as it is, it's the same in any type of office job. It's the exact same scenario. So the more that doesn't matter what kind of like path again you take, if you're going to act like an idiot and you're going to try and like have a big ego or anything like that sort of thing, it picks up on very, very quickly, and people do talk about it. And you don't want that. You want to be somebody that people can rely on, that can chat to, that sort of thing. So obviously you're there to work and you're there to have a good time, but you're also there to make sure that everybody else can have a good time too. So be that positive change that you want to be in the industry and you want to see, and then there shouldn't really anything that goes wrong from there. So coming on from that, obviously you're looking at you've been applying for jobs, and people aren't coming back to you. You're not hearing anything, or in this case, as the different like kind of rejection sentences that I've got here, these were all ones that I got from applying to different companies as well. So that fourth one there was one that actually I applied for after Brexit like kind of happened, or was like it's done. So you will get a lot. Don't expect to get a job straight off the bat. And like what I was saying earlier, me getting hired out of uni midway through my fourth year, that in itself is not very common. It is quite rare. So what I would say is obviously make sure you finish obviously your uni degree if you can. If you do get hired out of uni, that's fantastic. But when you are applying out with uni or into your final years, don't be defeated by these. Fortunately, your application was not heard, or like we didn't think you were the right thing for this role. That sort of stuff. It's bad to look at, and it does also seem that like you'll never get an industry job if you keep seeing these emails over and over again. Power through it, absolutely power through it. I have a friend that's recently just got a job at Rockstar, and he's been looking for about 6 to 8 months, and that's coming out of uni. So it's you keep powering through it, and eventually you will get something, whether that be AAA or whether it be indie. If you get your foot in the door, that's it. You're kind of set. Again, it's always a learning experience. So whether you're applying for jobs and you're getting these rejection emails, or you're getting like access to interview, well, let's say access to interviews, you're given an interview, or you're given an art test, for example, or a programming test, those sorts of things, always take them as a learning experience. Even if you don't get hired, I think I've got it a little bit later on, but if you don't get hired, always ask for feedback, because there will be a case that if you don't ask for feedbacks, most leads will kind of just sit there and be like, all right, okay, cool, well, they didn't ask for feedback, that's fine, forget about it. Whereas if you do come back and you go, oh, could I get some feedback, and the company does give you it, that's going to be beneficial because you can take it onto your next job application, whether it's for the same company or a different company. Again, you can take it and use it. What could have been done differently? So was it maybe your CV that didn't get you the job application through? Was it your portfolio? Again, talking about adding personal flair to these things, making them, engaging, especially for artists. One of the big things that you'll be looking for is, making something that's engaging but not overbearing. That's something that's really, really important. And as an artist, for a lot of the time when I was at uni and they recommended it, was, try and make them that little bit different to everybody else's if you can. Obviously, keep them structured. You want to, if you can read it in a nice manner and you can actually understand it, that's great. But if you can add that flair to make it pop, that's beneficial. For your portfolio, keep it simple, but again, add the flair. If you go the extra mile with your portfolios, absolutely, people will look at that and go, oh yeah, that's cool. But sometimes it can go a little bit overboard. So try and find that happy medium. For people that are on your ArtStation, for example, for the 3D artists and stuff, and the 2D artists out there, put your your best work, your favorite work at the top. Try not to put anything that's like half baked or half finished onto your actual portfolio. I know I say that, and I did that with mine, but try to avoid it if you can. Try and show finalized assets, show the breakdown of like your normal maps, things like that. People want to see that sort of thing. But especially when you're applying for jobs, because it shows you understand the actual process and the breakdown of everything you're doing. And then obviously, how'd you come across in that interview? If you're a little bit shy, you're a little bit nervous, that's absolutely fine. I was nervous coming in today to do this talk. Well, I say coming in, but coming on to do this talk. And that's absolutely fine. That's human nature. Most people will see through that shyness and they'll go, do you know what? This person probably has potential, and then they'll speak to you again, or they'll give you a test to do. As long as you're, trying your best to make sure you answer the questions and things like that, you will be absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. And again, it is a learning experience. If they turn around and go, oh, you were maybe too shy, work on that. Try and, speak to different people, meet new people, things like that. Build that confidence up. It's very, very important. There it is again. I always ask for feedback, and keep applying to jobs. So when I say that, don't just be like, oh, well, I'm a 3D artist, I'm going to apply for, a programming role and hopefully get into 3D art through that way. Don't do that. A lot of people do use QA to get a foot in the door. Again, QA is a good place to start, but QA does also have its own dedicated career path as well. A lot of people see it as this like, oh, you only use QA as a stepping stone. It's not just a stepping stone. It is its own, dedicated career path that you can easily go into. If you find that you enjoy QA and you want to stay in it, that's absolutely fine. But if you want to get into a company, QA is a good route to go through anyway, because it gives you that background knowledge on like how the company works and things like that as well. If you're looking for actual 3D art roles, if you are a junior, don't go applying for senior roles because it will just get rejected immediately. There's a reason that they're senior. Same again with programming. Try to aim from mid-level to junior if you can, and then see where it goes. I applied for associate originally because I wasn't aware for production. I wasn't aware that associate was like the second tier up, and it was actually assistant was the first. So when I went into it, I went in for the associate role, and they were like, actually, we like you, we'll give you the assistant one instead. So you can obviously apply for a tier, well, I say tier up, but a little bit more experienced job role, absolutely. You might get the lower one, but that's absolutely fine. That means you're in the door. But don't go applying for stuff that's like senior or director or any of that sort of stuff, because there's no point applying to stuff that you absolutely won't get unless you're like, God's gift with all your like talents and things like that. Try and stay realistic, but try and apply to the things that are, reasonable and make sense rather than just willy-nilly going like, I need to apply, I need to apply, I need to apply. Take some structure to it. What I would say is like a kind of final point on this. Keep track of all your, rejections, who you've applied to, what stages they're in. Again, Excel's a great thing for this. But that's what I did. I kept track of essentially who I was applying to, what stages I got to, who rejected me immediately, when I did that as well. So when I applied and when I heard back, just so you can kind of see a pattern, so you can easily track to see, right, is there any common themes happening within this? And maybe it might turn out that it is your CV you need it fixed. Maybe it is your portfolio, or just the interviews are really, really rough. And that way, kind of, you're not going to get lost in all the like noise of like, I need to get a job, I need to get a job, I need to get a job. Try and give yourself some structure and that kind of breathing space by looking at that data that you're kind of collected on yourself. And then finally, is like a kind of good things to know. So obviously, in my time at uni, there was a lot of like different kind of programs and stuff that were running. There are still obviously really good programs that are running at the moment as well. So if you're looking for coming out of uni, or even a uni at the moment and looking for extra experience on top of, maybe you don't have a job, but these are good things to look at. So Women in Games is a very, very good program to look at, especially for any of the women that are in the talk today as well. Essential for this will give you a really, really good support network for being able to network with other women that are actual Women in Games ambassadors. They host talks, they host events, they do mentoring a little bit as well. It's really, really good for that sort of thing, so I highly recommend checking them out. You've got Limit Break as well, so there's a few folk at CIG that also take part in Limit Break. That is essentially where people from industry offer mentorship advice for 6 months. You can then apply as a mentee, and then from that kind of process, you get to go through, right, okay, this is what I've been working on, and an industry professional give you, feedback on your work, give you some guidance, maybe give you some advice on CVs, portfolios, that sort of thing. They're there to help you get into the industry. There's a lot of the time you tend to see that when these limit break kind of mentorships finish, people are applying for jobs and they usually get picked up pretty quickly because they've had this industry experience already. They've had the benefit of being able to go, this is the kind of path you need to take to help get you a job in the industry. Grads in Games. So I think you guys have grads in Games. I know I did at uni. They might be called something else, so there's another variant of that. This was actually a really, really good thing to have on your CV anyway, is being a student ambassador for Grads and Games, organising things for your uni. Obviously, like the folk that organise this today, things like that, talks, events, being able to get people in that are either wanting to talk to you or even just in general organising things for your university. That shows you're taking the initiative and you're actually going, do you know what? I want to do this. I want to be part of the industry. And it speaks volumes for anybody that's looking at your CV. And then Into Games as well. So Into Games itself is more kind of like Grads and Games, but for anybody in general that's looking to kind of get into the industry. With that, Into Games, I know they do some game jams every so often. You've got the global game jam and stuff that's done outside of that as well. They're really, really beneficial to do. I highly recommend doing game jams if you can. They will give you the experience that you need in working in teams. You'll understand the highs and lows of working in a small team with limited scale and scope, and also time as well. But I would highly recommend checking out Into Games, speaking to the people that are there because they're always up for talking, and connect yourself. And the one thing I don't have on this, which I should have added as well, is look for on Twitter, look for game dev like societies, look for game dev discords, things like that. Most of the time, the game dev discords will allow students in where you can actually meet professionals, you can talk, you can ask questions, maybe not get feedback on your work, but ask different questions about the industry and things like that, and get that knowledge so that you're at least semi-prepped for when you go in, so that you're not just kind of feeling around in the dark when you're applying for different things and getting kind of struggling for that kind of side. And yeah, I think that is pretty much it. So yeah, thank you everybody much for listening. If anybody has any questions, I don't know if we've got time for questions, but I'm happy to answer any of them. And also as well, if you do have any questions about production or anything on the back of this talk, just again fire me a message if you don't feel comfortable putting them in here or asking me today, and I'll be more than happy to kind of reach out to you when I have the chance and reply. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I know at least I found this pretty useful, being a part of Games PR and community management. But I'm sure a lot of artists found it useful in kind of like a workspace and seeing how a producer would work in their everyday life and seeing what kind of resources in the industry. I'm seeing that some are popping into the chat already from the voice events. If you want to just click over there and have a look at them. Yeah, if you want me to read them up, I can read them up. But if you want to just go at it yourself, you can do that.
Yeah. Sorry, what chat is that that's in? Sorry.
So if you just click on the voice chat events, there's a little pop-up bubble that has
Oh yeah,
kind
the
of a
open
chat
chat.
system. Discord added this new feature, it's all connected, pretty useful.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I use Discord quite a lot, and I didn't even know that. So that's every day's a learning experience.
Yeah, it's been implemented like 3 months or so.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. Yeah. I guess if you wanted to read them out, then I can answer them and do it that way if you want.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have, do you have any insight and tips for people who would want to switch from art or other disciplines to a job in production?
Yeah, so when you're looking at kind of switching between different job roles, it's very much a case of, like I was saying before, learning the different skills and getting the experience to, be able to understand what that job role is and how to do it. A lot of the time when people at our company switch between different roles, so they'll jump from like QA to production, and then they'll jump from, like production into like art and things like that. It's very common for producers to kind of decide to go for a job role elsewhere. But if you're coming from a more of an art discipline into that, the best way that I could probably recommend is speak to other producers in Discords, see what kind of experience that they've had, see what they actually do every day to day as well. And then if you can, it's when you're in industry, connect more with your actual producer and give the notion that, yeah, this is something that I want to do, because they'll be able to give you all the resources that they can to kind of help you get into production and understand it, because they will have that information. Is the best answer that I can give, is kind of stick closer with your producer, give the kind of notion that it's something that you were interested in, and they'll be able to kind of give you the resources and give you the support to be able to actually go, this is what I want to do. If you're in uni, all I would really recommend is have a look at production methodologies, understand what production actually is in terms of what they should be doing, and then also as well look at edge cases, look at, other industries, not just games. Look at, office work, general office work. Look at, I know again, this is maybe not going to be a good recommendation for most people, but the military is a very, very good way because they're so regimented and they have quite a lot of organization and stuff like that. Looking at the way that they produce different projects for their, troops and things like that, whether it's like courses, things like that, that's a really, really good way of actually looking at, this is how you would organize something that's in a very, very rigid setting. And then if you learn that and understand that and kind of can put that into practice through like game jams and things, obviously not as rigid as the military, but if you could put that into practice in game jams and a little bit less of a strict approach, that's really good practice to kind of help generate that kind of sort of skill base set so that when you come into industry, you can go, do you know what? I want to change and do that sort of thing.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
another one is, how does a producer approach supporting individuals with hidden disabilities like ADHD and autism? If one of your team is having a down day, how do you approach it as someone in a manager position? So it's a bit of a twofold: hidden disabilities and then a down day or like having a hard time.
Okay. So from my experience, and this is like again coming also from working in retail as well, a lot of the time when it comes to having like a hidden disability or something like that, producers normally wouldn't have access to that information originally unless obviously the lead felt it was necessary for them to know that. So oftentimes it'll be your lead will know about that hidden disability because it might be something you will maybe need to disclose to the company. What I will say is definitely if you can, don't hide. If you do have a disability, don't feel like you need to hide it, especially from the company. If you tell the company that you have a disability, no matter what it is, the company will be accommodating of that and trying to help make sure that you can work in a like safe and healthy environment for that. Which then would allow, say for example, me as a producer to look at that and go, okay, so say for example, there's maybe something going on that you've got that maybe you don't like to talk about. We obviously wouldn't raise it, but what I would do is I would mentally sit there and go, okay, maybe this person can't do things at the same pace as somebody else. Maybe that, like, it may be a case that, they work for very, very quickly over a certain amount of time and then they kind of just fall off for a little bit, and then that's absolutely fine. Nobody's going to penalise you, and I would personally obviously wouldn't penalise anybody for having those sorts of disabilities and being able to kind of, work through that with them. I would much rather it be a case of I'd be able to have you approach me and say, look, I'm really struggling with this. This is what's going on. And then I can help you with it. If that's not the case, you can always go to your lead. Your lead is there to support you. So that, I guess, for like the first kind of part of the question, I think would answer it. Sorry, what was the second part of the question?
The
There?
second one kind of falls more into general, like having a bad day, kind of struggling a little bit. Like, how do you approach that as a manager position?
Okay. So if you're having like a slow day or you're having like kind of a bad day, there's like one or two things that you can kind of obviously kind of talk about that. If you don't talk about it with your producer, but you are having that slow day, that's something that I would normally pick up on to be like, oh, maybe this person's struggling a little bit. So I would normally reach out and just go, hey, how we doing? This sort of thing. How you getting on? But it's not a reach out to be like, oh, why aren't you doing this on time? Why is this not happening? It's more of a just kind of how are you getting on? The ability to facilitate your team. I know I've said this multiple times, but facilitating your team is absolutely crucial as a producer, and being able to kind of understand everybody's needs, wants, that sort of thing. For me anyway, if I was to approach somebody and go, oh, you're having a slow day, that's absolutely fine. I have slow days myself as well. I'm not expecting everybody to be 100% working all the time. There are certain studios that are a little bit more strict than others. But as a person myself, for like in production, and for anybody else that's going into industry, if your producer or your lead is really hammering on you to say like this needs done, this needs done, this needs done, and there's no care about that, having a slow day, having a bad day, that's a red flag. That is something that I would bring up and be like, I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel like I'm being looked after properly. I'm not being supported. So I would definitely raise it. But for me, I would just, I'd reach out, give a little poke to say, hey, how are you doing? And that sort of thing. And then if you are taking a little while to do tasks, we would look at working ways around that. If it's a case of somebody else going to come on to help you, or, if you are just wanting to kind of do it yourself, I just give you the space and go, right, if you need more time, we'll give you more time. That's fine. There's no pressure, if you like, to get the work done. At the end of the day, it's a job. The job's always going to be there. Your health comes first no matter what it is. So, take it as it is. If you're having that slow day, that's fine. You know, I wouldn't worry about it.
Sounds to me like it's about having a lot of compassion to those around you and
Yeah.
understanding what your team is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So we have, how was your interview experience like? What was the most frightening bit?
The most frightening bit was when I found out it was 4 interviews. Production in itself is the industry's kind of leading, especially more production wise, between 4 and 6 interviews before you actually get the job. 6 is an absolute ridiculous amount, but mine was 4. For artists and programmers, usually it's 1 or 2, but you have your art test in between, or your actual programming test. Again, I say artists or programmers, designers, level designers, it's the exact same thing as well. Um, you'll usually have your first interview, you'll then get a test, you'll then have a second interview to go over your test, and then you'll maybe have a third, which is like, oh, you got the job, or to meet the team, and then you'll get your job offer to be like, this is obviously where you want to go. For mine, it was 4 interviews, so I met the production director first. I then met the pillar producers that we have at the company, who I would be working under. Then I obviously met them again, but they kind of gave me more situational questions to be like, if Joe Bloggs was doing this in the office to somebody, how would you deal with it? If Joe Bloggs was having a tantrum or whatever, how would you deal with that sort of thing? Giving you the kind of situational questions to gauge your understanding of the key core principles of production. And then the last one was meeting the teams and seeing who I would be working with, and kind of who would be taking me on. So I met my lead props artist when I was still looking after them. I meet them. I met the environment artists that I would eventually end up looking after, that I do now. And I like my lead lighting artist as well, that I currently look after. So normally it's first interview is just a general meet. Your next 1 or 2 will be like more situational, kind of getting into the core of what production is, why you want to do it, that sort of thing. And then your last one hopefully will be like meet the team. And then if the team like you, obviously you then probably get the job. Hopefully.
I saw a really nice comment. You mentioned how Lewis was in here. So you actually mentioned a comment here. Stefano's always been accommodating to me when I've been having my slower days. His schedule was so good that he can move days around and give me extra when I was struggling to focus. So that showcases what you're saying. You're preaching, like you're walking to walk and talking to talk kind of situation. That's really good to see that it works.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things where like a lot of people tend to be like, oh yeah, this is what you should do, and this is what you should do, and they don't actually practice it. But yeah, I always kind of take the approach of like, you should practice what you preach, and if you don't, why are you preaching it? So yeah, I take great pride in being able to look after the guys on the team and everything like that. So I make sure that they can do their work. Producers' jobs are very much of the team come first, I come second. That's how I kind of deal with it and approach it.
Amazing. We got a question that's more situated to the company. So, what is CIG like as a company? Seems like a good place to work at.
Yeah, for our first job in the industry, CIG is a really, really good company to work for. And again, this is not as like a bias to the company. The company's told me, be like, oh yeah, to say good things about us. But Cloud Imperium overall is a really, really good employer. They give lots of benefits and things like that as well. But there is a massive support network there with the company. Everybody wants you to succeed. People will always make sure that if you need anything, they're there for you. That sort of thing. Nobody's really gonna, unless you're obviously doing your job very poorly to the point where like you're not reaching out to anybody about it. That's obviously maybe where the company will be a little bit more, harsher. But overall, the company I would say is very, very good. And from looking at the way that other companies run, especially with like obviously the recent stuff that's come out of other companies as well, I would say this like CIG in general is like a kind of gold standard of what you kind of really want to be like aiming for, is like a company to work for, I would say.
That's good. It sounds like CIG is picking up a lot of staff students. So hey, there are opportunities. There's a question here on communication. So, what are the best ways that you communicate with your team, and does it differ from your own managers?
Yeah, so with communicating with the team, there's different ways of doing it. Obviously, we use Teams to like actual communication. We use Teams, and obviously, with us being back in person now, we've returned to office. We usually go like face to face. A lot of the time, I'll actually just what I'll do is I'll get up out of my chair, I'll go over, speak to somebody, be like, "Oh, hey, how are you getting on with this?" and have a look at their work. And while I don't have the base knowledge of like how, well, I have the base knowledge of how they do their job, but I don't have an in-depth knowledge. I can appreciate the work that they're doing and see how they're actually integrating and stuff. But with CIG and a lot of other games companies, if you are in office, they really do promote, get up out of your chair, go, speak to your artists, speak to your programmers, speak to your designers, actually in person, integrate with them in person. The new office that we've got's also got like an area for playing like pool and air hockey and that sort of stuff. So we also sit and like play games as a team. If like at the end of the day, for example, I see obviously Carl's in here as well. Like tonight, for example, when I finished work, I played a game of pool with Carl before I came on here. So things like that. You're not just integrating with the team in terms of, on the day to day, you're speaking with them and everything, but you're making friends in the team as well. I would say, as a team producer, which is what I work as, you become a part of that team. You're never really like a side-on attachment. Anything above a team producer, so somebody who has to look over like all production, that's where you kind of tend to not have much contact with the devs and more with other production staff. But as an actual producer that's looking after a specific team or multiple teams, you're there as the team, you're a teammate, you're making friends in that team, you're talking to them all the time, that sort of thing, and you're encouraged to have them share work with you and things like that as well. So at least that's how it works at CIG anyway. Other companies might differ, but yeah.
Thank you. It sounds like again we're falling back onto the entire being compassionate and being human and kind of just relating to those around you.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have a question on CV because you mentioned several times adding extra flair to things like your CV, but what would that actually entitle? So if you have any examples or anything like that.
I don't have. I should have prepped examples actually, because that would have been a good shout. When I mean add extra flair or extra personality, I mean as in a case of if you take like a blank Word document, for example, and you type out all your different, qualifications. If you go into Google and you type in job CVs and you look at them, they're usually a white bit of paper that's got a bunch of text on it, and that's it. Bullet points, that sort of thing. When you want to add the extra flair, it's more about how you structure it and how you color those types of CVs. So you could have, for example, in fact, actually, I might be able to show you my CV, which would be a good shout because producers' CVs are a little bit more boring than others, but they get the job done. Yeah, here we go. So, for example, once if folk hop in, I don't know if for people that are in the room as well. So for example, this is what I mean by adding flair. So you can see that as a producer, I'm not very art based, but I make my, CV a little bit more engaging. There's like different kind of colors or contrast, so it's grabbing your eye automatically. You can easily see down the left hand side what softwares I understand and what skills I've got, my hobbies and everything like that. So that's all clearly outlined. You've got all my contact information at the top. I also have a QR scanner. So if, say, for example, somebody decides to print out your CV, you can scan that QR code and it will take you to my website. So you can actually sit and look at the website while you're interviewing me, for example, if you just have the CV and that's it. This is a really, really good idea. A lot of people don't print out CVs anymore, but if on the off chance that they do, it's better you have it than you don't. And then just the way that things are structured. So I've went for a more simplistic approach of essentially outlining each individual role and all the bullet points and stuff. Because for production, when you're looking at that, you want to be, marking off what you've done and where you do them from and that sort of your experience. But if you've got like an artist, for example, I would expect to have like a little bit more brighter colors. I would expect to see more shapes like circles, that sort of thing, like kind of outlining, giving shape to your actual CV, that sort of thing. It's when you're adding flair, what you're trying to do is you're trying to show your understanding of the job that you're applying for through adding shape to your CV. Whether that's like, for example, with art, adding different shapes, different colors, showing that it's vibrant, showing that, like a stereotypical, this is what an art CV would look like, is like, that sort of thing. Whereas like a programmer CV, for example, might be more heavily structured, but it's kind of similar to mine where it's got a little bit more kind of like contrast and colors to grab that person's eye, that sort of thing. So when I say like add flair, this is what I kind of mean. It's mine's isn't just a white document, that you're looking at. It's a grey background, so it's automatically not white. and then you're giving yourself different areas specifically mapped out so you can actually read it in a uniformed way. So you can easily read, you'll naturally go, oh, Stefano, your eyes will automatically look at all my contact information, and you'll go, oh, this is how I reach them. Then you'll look down, you'll go softwares, and then you'll move across the relevant experience. Same with the education as well. Again, you've already got this information, so you'll usually skip this. But what you'll do is you'll then look at, okay, my education. This is everything that I've done. Oh, okay, that's easy enough to read. Volunteering. This is a load of garbage. Realistically, you don't need this amount in it. But it's worth giving the background information. If somebody wants to read it, someone can read it. So, yeah, this is what I kind of mean by in terms of like adding flair. You're not just using a white text document that's just got stuff on it. You're giving life to your CV. Yeah.
I'm seeing something fun happening in chat, and Lewis is being a bit of a jokester over here. So I got a question on how do you feel about skill bars in CVs?
I would say probably avoid them on the basis that how do you know what, and again, obviously this isn't to say that obviously, you don't know your own self-worth and you don't know your own skill level, but how can you accurately transcribe your skill level to a skill bar? That's what you need to be asking yourself when you think about it. I know a lot of people are like, oh, skill bars are cool because you can show like, this is how far I am on it. That's absolutely fine. But why give that information on the CV when you can actually talk about it to the person that's in the interview? If they want to know about it, they're going to ask about it, and that gives you the opportunity to work more with it. If you're sitting looking at a skill bar and somebody goes, "All right, okay, they're like 90% on like, say for example, 3ds Max," they'll go, "Okay, so what is 90%?" They've already got an expectation in their head that you're a master of that software. You don't want to give anybody a preconceived idea of this is how good I am. You want to go, this is what I know, and then you can build and tailor your answer and response to what the person is asking. Therefore, it's giving them a more accurate picture of what you are, and you're not coming across as underwhelming. Because naturally, if you look at anything, no matter what it is, if you give a skill bar of a certain rating and you go, oh, actually, this person's really, really good at max, because again, 90%, you've automatically got that thought in your head of, well, they're really, really good at it. So if they start saying, oh, well, I only know this and I only know that, you're automatically thinking in your head, subconsciously, you're going, oh, they aren't as great as what they said they were. That's an automatic negative. You want to try avoid doing that if possible, and you really want to kind of, like I was saying, give yourself the ability to mold yourself in that interview for that person, so that you're not giving them a bad like kind of representation of what you actually are and who you are and your skill and that sort of thing. I hope that probably gives a. I know there's a lot of talking, but I hope that kind of gives a good example.
Yeah, it's the skill bar is something that's been mentioned to us at the Yuki conference. That was a couple of weeks ago. So I see them in chat doing it. And I'm like, okay, how far do we explain this? So yeah, I don't see any other questions going on right now. And oh, there we go. Okay, so somebody's asking if the PowerPoint will be available to kind of look into at a later point. Is that something you're interested in doing?
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah. If people are wanting to have a look at it, I can send it over so you guys can have access to it.
Yeah, we'll do that, Ben.
Yeah.
If there's any other questions, or if those at uni want to go look around the room and see if anybody in the room has any questions and pop that in. I see another one, unrelated to the role specifically, but how would someone go about negotiating salary?
Oh, that's a good question. Again, this is very much dependent on the company, because a lot of the time the companies will have set standard of like, this is how much we will pay you. This is what the expected rate is, that sort of thing. Normally, yeah, strong headlock. Yeah, give me that money. A lot of the time when you're coming to like salary discussions and stuff as a junior, obviously know your self-worth. Usually at the moment, juniors, depending on your role, will get anywhere between 18 to 22 grand a year, thereabouts. That's normally what the expected rate is. 22 is on the high end, by the way, so that isn't necessarily mean to say you will get 22, but it's, it is possible. I've seen it with other people. Again, that's more production related. If it's, say for example, artists, I don't know if Lewis is maybe or Carl have got a good idea of what artists get paid, but it can vary. if you're ever looking for, like, say for example, you've done a year, yeah, you can be, yeah. So it's like if you go into like a junior role, you're not going to be like, oh, I want 50 grand. You know, asking something like 22, 23 grand for a junior role is not bad asking at all. And most people should be able to give you it. If they're giving you 18 grand for something like an artist or programmer, I'd be asking questions, personally. But you know, the higher up you go and the more experience that you get as it comes to like mid-level, senior, you get more sway in terms of like, I might just leave the company if I don't get this salary, none of that, and then they come to an agreement with it. But for when you're starting off in industry, especially for a lot of folk here, the best way that I would do it is ask. Don't be greedy, but don't be, you know, sitting there going like, oh, but I'm not worth this much, so I shouldn't ask. Is kind of the best approach. There isn't any one good way to ask for, you know, a raise, or there isn't one best way to, you know, ask for like a salary increase at a job interview. I will also point out, just because obviously it is the reality of like real life, is that if you ask for a salary that is oftentimes unrealistic, the company might just drop you from the interview process. They might just be like, we're not interested, and that's it. Because I have seen it happen before with other folk that have been at my uni. So it doesn't happen all the time, but it is to be aware of that. It's not, and again, not to frighten anybody either. Please do ask if you feel like the salary is not good enough, but also don't act like you should be getting, you know, way, way, way more than what you should be, because that might just turn the company away from you to be like, well, actually, yeah, we don't want to pursue this, sorry, and then that's it, blown your boat. So yeah, look at your local area and see what the average prices is, price and salary.
Yeah, that's a pretty fair answer.
Yeah.
We should probably kind of wrap up, but I saw one here that's a little bit of a, I guess it's a little bit jokey. Thoughts on NFTs? I got
Lewis
a
makes
lot.
Lewis makes NFTs. He'll get that joke. No, he doesn't make NFTs. Yeah, personally for me, NFTs aren't a great thing. I'm not on board with them. They killed the planet. You know, they're a waste of money. I say that, but then I, you know, collect all this like stuff behind me. But you're better collecting something physical rather than something digital. Why, you know, it's tangible. You know, why would you want to collect something digital? Is my opinion.
Okay, I
Yeah.
think we're about time to wrap up. Thank you so much for coming here and joining us. It's been, at least for me, very like it's a lot to learn here, and there's ways of seeing things, and it just showcases so much how the industry kind of is, and just what you can expect from a producer, at least, which is not something that's talked very much about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see a lot of chats going on right now thanking you. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
If you want to stick around and talk to people in chat, go ahead. But I think that will be it for the voice chat.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much for having me as well. It's been fantastic. And again, if anybody does have any questions, please reach out to me, and I will try my best to answer. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Bye.